Hi and welcome to this video in the MRDCL Understanding Concepts series. In this video we're going to look at product tests, or where you get rotations of questions or sections of a questionnaire and you want to pull them together in analysis. And we'll look at some data first to explain that. You'll find the files for this video in the folder DAT103. So let's look at this data set here, and what we're going to do in this video is approach this from two different ways. One is where we pick the data up as it is, and then in the tables work out how we want to pull the tables together from the two tests. And the second is where we actually manipulate the data so that it's in an easy shape to handle the product test. So just to look at this data now and explain what I'm talking about. You can see here that it starts with record number 1 in the first 3 fields. The next field is a gender, code 1 and 2, so this person's a male, one below is a female. Then this code here is a rotation code. So in this particular example, we're assuming that they see 2 products, A and B. They might see A first, they might see B first, and it will vary from respondent to respondent. A 1 in this code I'm highlighting now means that they see A first and B second. A 2 down here for this record means they see B first and A second. Now, of course, the product test could be more complex than that. It could be there's 5 products that are rotated, and that's much more complex. But for this example, it should give you all the insight you need to be able to apply that to more complex rotations. And when we come across to the data here, the data is in fields 11 up to 30. The first 10 of those fields, 11 to 20, the ones I'm highlighting now, in this case refer to A, and for those fields refer to B, whereas for the second respondent, where they do B first, these fields refer to B, and these fields refer to A. So you can see that, in fact, in both cases, the A's are getting 1s in most columns or most questions in this field, and the B's are getting 2s because the B's are tested second for the first respondent and first for the second respondent. So let's look at one approach that we can take to sort this data out and make it a little bit more manageable. Let's go to a script now that I've got. Let's go to this run here. And in this run here, you can see I've specified the serial numbers and the card characters, and it's 100 in length, and I've got the gender question in 4 and the rotation in 5. Now, the way this data is being picked up is just to pick it up as it stands. So we've got a loop here running from 1 to 10, which picks up questions 1A to 1J, regardless of whether it's talking about A or B at this stage. So at this stage, it's just picking up the codes 1, 2, 3. It doesn't know, effectively, whether it's A or B in these fields because it's just the first 10 columns. Or the only way we know what product we're talking about is referring to the rotat variable here, which tells me whether that's A first or whether it's B first. All right, then we'll go to the next block of questions, which are question 2 here, and that's picking up the next 10 statements for the product, and that's the second product tested. So Q1 is the first product tested and Q2 is the second. We'll just quickly look at that as a listing file, and here you'll see here's Q1A down to Q1J and Q2A down to Q2J, picking up 21 columns 21 to 30. So far so good. So when it gets to the IDF and it writes this data away, the only way it knows whether it's referring to A and B for question 1 and question 2 is by looking at rotat. And that's exactly what we use when it comes to the tables. So what we do for the tables, we use the table overlay facility. And an overlay basically means that you're allowing people into the same table more than once. So what we're doing here, we're saying to get the data for product A, we can say if rotat is a 1, in other words, they've done A first, I want my 10 tables in this loop of 1 to 10 to come from question 1, whereas if they do B first, their rotat 2, I want the data for question A to come from, for product A to come from question 2. And then of course it will be the reverse when we come to deal with the second product, the product B. Again, a loop of 1 to 10. This time, if it's rotat 2, they've done B first, I want the answers in question 1. And if it's B second, I want the answers in question 2. And if we look at that again in the listing file, that just becomes a little bit more clear about what's going on. So we're saying here that table 1 is Q1A when it's filtered on rotat 1, and the answers for product A are also to be added together. When rotat is 2, we want Q2A. So it's the same question, but it's from the second set of 10 columns. So this is using table overlay facility to say, okay, I'm going to make table 1 come from 2 places, and that goes right through for all 20 of my tables. And if we run that very quickly, we can look at our tables, and sure enough you can see that for product A both people give the good code. As you may remember, they get code 1 for both for the person who tried A first and tried B second. So that looks as though that's working. Let's find the B, and here we can sure enough see that they've slipped down to the second code, because the one who tried second, respondent 1, gave a code 2, and also the one who tried B first gave a code 2 as well. So again, that looks as though we have correct data there. So that's one way of approaching this type of project. We're going to look at a second way now, and what we're going to look at now is we're going to look at manipulating the data so that the data is in the same data locations always for product A, and B is always in the same locations for product B. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to shuffle the data so that regardless of how it starts, I want to put A in columns 11 to 20 for the 10 rating statements there, and I want to put B in 21 to 30. So this time what I've done is I've set card characters to 200, and I'm going to use 101 to 200 or 101 upwards to sort of temporarily store my data as I move it about. So what I'm saying is, if rotat is a 1, in other words they do A first and B second, I'm just going to copy what's in 11 to 30 into 111 to 130. I'm not actually going to use 111 to 130 in a minute, I'm just storing it temporarily in there. So that will mean 111 to 120 stores the data for product A, and 121 to 130 stores the data for product B. However, if it's rotat 2, I'm going to put in 111 to 120 what was in the second block of columns, 21 to 30, and also in 121 to 130, I'm going to put what was in the first block of columns. So effectively, by filtering on rotat 2, I'm switching the data around so that in 111 to 130, 111 to 120 always has the data for product A, and 121 to 130 always has the data for product B. Now I could use those columns 121 to 130 to build my variables from. I've actually chosen here to move it back to 11 to 30. So now we're moving it back to 11 to 30 from 111 to 130, which means that what's in 11 to 20 will always be A data, product A data, so I can label it as such. And what's in 21 to 30 will always be product B data. Now the benefit of doing that is that the tables become much easier. I haven't got to overlay my tables. Everything in Q1A now to Q1J is product A data, and everything in Q2A to Q2J is product B data. So it swings and roundabouts. Sometimes one way is better than the other. Both, though, are perfectly good ways of working. And of course, if you had 3 products, you might need to move them all out to, in a similar way and rotate them in some more complicated way. But the principles here would be the same. The movement of data would be the same. What would get more complex or start to get more unwieldy would be, let's say you had 5 product rotations, all your tables would need to be overlaid 5 times. Now, the other way that you could approach this whole problem, particularly where you get cases where perhaps people try 5 out of 10 products, so it starts to get quite complex, is to use go out tos, as was shown in the hierarchical data video, where you analyze or you handle blocks of columns. So that's an alternative way where you can use that technique right away on another level of data, and if you follow the steps in that hierarchical data video, you'll find a very good solution that you could use for very complex product tests, where, as I say, someone perhaps tests 5 out of 10 products. Back to this problem now then. So we've got these tables now are nice and simple because we've switched the data around, and we can run it, and sure enough we get the same tables out. Now we get the 2 product for A all the way through, and when we go down to the B tables we get the 2 in the average, as you would expect. So it looks as though the project is working fine either way and we're getting the same results. So that completes this video on how to handle product tests. Obviously some tests are harder, but these principles should work very well for you in pretty much any type of product test that you have. Thank you.